Welcome to Survival Horror Ambience, where the airwaves pulse with tales of survival and the echoes of the undead. Join us as we broadcast from the heart of the apocalypse, where every word could be our last and every signal a lifeline in the darkness. This is Radio of the Dead. Chapter 1. The Last Broadcast. Ronald Campbell's voice boomed through the crackling speakers of the radio station as he began his early morning show. Good morning, folks. This is Ronald Campbell coming to you live from WKZB, your source for news and entertainment in the city's heart. Inside the bustling studio, Ronald's producer Sarah darted around, adjusting knobs and fiddling with equipment to ensure the broadcast ran smoothly. Ronald, we've got a jam-packed show today. Are you ready to knock them dead? She asked with a grin, her eyes flicking between the control panel and her host. Ronald flashed her a confident smile, his eyes twinkling with anticipation. You bet, Sarah. Let's give our listeners something to talk about, he replied, adjusting his headset and leaning closer to the microphone. Ronald's signature blend of confidence and controversy filled the airwaves as he delved into the routine weather report and traffic updates. Looks like another beautiful day ahead, folks, but watch out for some congestion on I-80. Seems like there's an unusual jam causing quite the delay, he announced, his voice tinged with curiosity. Sarah's brow furrowed as she monitored the incoming reports, her fingers flying across the keyboard to keep pace with the unfolding chaos. Ronald, I'm getting some disturbing messages here. There's talk of violence breaking out across the city, she interjected, her voice tight with concern. Ronald's expression darkened as he absorbed the grim news, his mind racing with the implications. Keep me updated, Sarah. We need to stay ahead of this, he replied, his voice grave as he turned back to the microphone. But as Ronald continued his spirited discussion, a sense of urgency permeated the studio, with Sarah and the rest of the production team working tirelessly to keep the broadcast on track amidst the growing turmoil outside. Folks, it appears we've got some troubling developments. Stay tuned as we bring you the latest updates on these unfortunate incidents, Ronald announced, his voice carrying a hint of concern as he glanced at Sarah, their silent exchange speaking volumes about the gravity of the situation. Chapter 2. Voices in the Chaos. As Ronald Campbell's broadcast pressed on, the atmosphere inside the radio station crackled with tension. With each passing minute, the stream of incoming calls grew more urgent, reflecting the escalating chaos gripping the city. Ronald, lines are lighting up like crazy. We've got callers desperate to get through, Sarah exclaimed, her voice tinged with apprehension as she gestured towards the blinking console. Ronald nodded grimly, his brow furrowed in concentration. Patch them through, Sarah. Let's hear what the people have to say, he instructed, his voice steady despite the mounting unease. One by one, the voices of the city's residents filled the airwaves, each caller painting a vivid picture of the mayhem unfolding outside. Some shared harrowing tales of narrow escapes, while others pleaded for assistance in locating missing loved ones. Ronald, we've got Mary from downtown online too. She says she's barricaded in her apartment and can hear screams outside, Sarah relayed, her fingers dancing across the switchboard as she connected the call. Ronald leaned closer to the microphone, his heart heavy with empathy for Mary and others like her. Mary, tell us what's happening, he urged, his voice a beacon of reassurance amidst the chaos. Mary's voice trembled with fear as she spoke, the sound of distant screams punctuating her words. Ronald, it's chaos out here. I don't know what's happening, but I'm scared, she confessed, her desperation palpable even through the crackling static of the line. Ronald's resolve hardened as he listened to Mary's plight, his voice infused with determination. Hang tight, Mary. Help is on the way. We're in this together, he promised, his words a lifeline for the frightened caller and countless others listening intently. But just as Ronald prepared to sign off, a chilling voice crackled through the line, freezing him in place. Ronald, this is Jake. I was stuck in the riot on I-80. You won't believe what I saw, the caller began, his tone fraught with disbelief. Ronald's pulse quickened as he listened intently, his mind racing to comprehend the magnitude of Jake's words. And then, with a gut-wrenching clarity, the horrifying truth dawned on him. The people, Ronald, they were eating each other, Jake revealed, his voice filled with horror and disbelief. Chapter 3. The Sound of Madness. Inside the radio station, chaos reigned supreme as Ronald Campbell found himself at the epicenter of a storm unlike any he had ever witnessed. With each passing moment, the flood of reports pouring in from listeners and news sources alike painted a chilling picture of the city's descent into madness. "Sarah, I need updates on every hotspot in the city. Get me everything you can," Ronald barked, his voice strained with urgency as he paced the studio, his mind racing to keep pace with the unfolding crisis. Sarah nodded frantically, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she scrambled to gather the latest information. "Ronald, reports are flooding in from all over. The dead are walking and they're attacking anyone in their path," she replied, her voice trembling with disbelief. Ronald sifted through the deluge of reports, each more horrific than the last, and a sense of dread settled over the studio. The once bustling hub of activity now stood silent, save for the frantic tapping of keyboards and the distant wail of sirens echoing through the city streets. "Ronald, we've got a caller on line 5. He says he's barricaded in his apartment and can hear screams outside," Sarah announced, her voice shaking as she connected the call. Ronald took a deep breath, steeling himself for what he knew would be another harrowing tale of survival in the face of unimaginable horror. "You're live on the air. Tell us what's happening," he urged, his voice a steady anchor amidst the storm. The caller's voice quivered with fear as he recounted the chaos unfolding outside his window, each word a testament to the terror gripping the city. "Ronald, it's like hell out here. The dead are walking and they're eating the living," he confessed, his desperation palpable even through the crackling static of the line. Ronald listened silently, his heart heavy with the weight of the caller's words. But before he could respond, another urgent voice crackled through the line, sending a shiver down his spine. "Ronald, this is Sarah from WKZB. I've just received word from the CDC. They've declared a state of emergency," Sarah announced, her voice trembling with emotion as she relayed the grim news. As the reality of the situation sank in, Ronald knew that the city stood on the brink of collapse, its streets teeming with the walking dead, and its citizens facing an uncertain future. Chapter 4: The Outbreak Unveiled. The screams of terror from outside Ronald's window clawed at his heart, threatening to overwhelm him with despair. Tears welled in his eyes as he struggled to maintain his composure, the cacophony of horror threatening to engulf him. Ronald reached for his headphones with a trembling hand, desperate to drown out the agonized cries that echoed through the city streets. He pressed them tightly against his ears, the familiar sound of his voice offering a fragile sanctuary amidst the chaos. But even as Ronald sought refuge in the safety of his broadcast, a new voice cut through the static, bringing with it a grim revelation. "Ronald, we have a doctor on the line. Dr. Edgar is here to shed some light on the situation," Sarah announced, her voice tinged with urgency as she connected the call. Dr. Edgar's voice crackled through the line, starkly contrasting the chaos outside. "Good morning, Ronald. Thank you for having me on the air today," he began, his tone measured and calm. Ronald leaned closer to the microphone, his heart racing with anticipation. "Good morning, Dr. Edgar. Our listeners are eager to understand more about what's happening. Can you shed some light on the symptoms of this virus?" he asked, his voice tinged with urgency. Dr. Edgar paused for a moment, his words weighted with gravity. "Of course, Ronald. The symptoms of this virus are unlike anything we've seen before. It starts with flu-like symptoms, fever, fatigue, and muscle aches. But then it progresses rapidly. Victims become disoriented, aggressive, and eventually they lose all sense of humanity," he explained, his voice tinged with sorrow. Ronald's brow furrowed as he absorbed the doctor's words. "That sounds terrifying. Do you have any insight into how this virus originated?" he inquired, his mind racing with the implications of Dr. Edgar's revelations. The doctor sighed softly, his voice heavy with the weight of the truth. "Well, Ronald, it appears to have originated from a series of incidents involving organ transplants. In one case, a businessman underwent a kidney transplant in Dubai. Unfortunately, the donor had been infected with the virus, and it took some time for the symptoms to manifest in the recipient," he revealed, his words echoing with a sense of foreboding. Ronald's pulse quickened as he processed the doctor's words. "That's concerning. How did you come by this information, doctor?" he pressed, his voice tinged with curiosity. Dr. Edgar hesitated for a moment before responding, his voice betraying a hint of uncertainty. "I've been in contact with colleagues around the world, Ronald. We're all working together to understand the nature of this outbreak and find a way to contain it. But time is of the essence," he admitted, his words a sobering reminder of the stakes at hand. "How did you come by this information, Doctor?" he asked, his voice tinged with concern as the line began to crackle with static. Before Dr. Edgar could respond, the line went dead, leaving Ronald grappling with the unsettling silence that filled the studio. With a heavy heart, he turned to Sarah, his eyes filled with a mix of fear and determination. "We have to keep going, Sarah. Our listeners need to know the truth," Ronald declared, his voice steady despite the turmoil raging outside. But before they could resume the broadcast, Sarah's voice cut through the tension, her expression grave as she delivered the news they had been dreading. "Ronald, we're cutting away to the head of the CDC. They're addressing the situation," she announced, her tone tinged with resignation. As the head of the CDC attempted to downplay the reports of a zombie virus, Ronald's frustration boiled over. "They're lying to us, Sarah. We can't trust them to keep us safe," he declared, his voice laced with defiance as he prepared to deliver the truth to his listeners. "Seems like some high-up government folks are vanishing into thin air. Makes you wonder what's really going on, doesn't it? But hey, we're not about to let the truth slip away in the shadows. Nope, we're going to keep digging, keep talking, and keep you all in the loop." "'Cause that's what we do," he concluded, his tone a blend of determination and reassurance. Sarah chimed in, her expression mirroring Ronald's resolve. "You got that right, Ronald." Chapter 5. The Descent into Chaos. As Ronald and Sarah frantically worked to maintain control of the radio station amidst the escalating chaos outside, the unthinkable happened. An outbreak erupted within the very walls of their sanctuary. The air crackled with tension as the interns, once eager to learn the ropes of broadcasting, succumbed to the virus coursing through their veins. With bloodshot eyes and frenzied expressions, they launched into a rampage, their primal instincts driving them to attack anyone in their path. Ronald's heart raced as he watched in horror as the chaos unfolded before his eyes, with Bryson Taylor, the Next Up radio host, bearing the brunt of the intern's onslaught. Blood and gore painted the once pristine studio in a macabre tableau of violence. "Sarah, we need to get out of here," Ronald shouted over the cacophony of screams and snarls, his voice tinged with urgency as he grabbed her arm, pulling her towards the exit. Together, they fought tooth and nail to regain control of the radio station, wielding makeshift weapons with grim determination. With every swing of a chair leg or a microphone stand, they carved a path through the hordes of infected interns, their survival instincts kicking into overdrive. But as they made their way downstairs to seal the shutters and fortify their position, they found themselves outnumbered and surrounded. The stench of decay hung heavy in the air as the relentless tide of the undead closed in, their hungry moans echoing through the darkness. With nowhere left to run and no hope of escape, Ronald and Sarah stood back to back, their breaths coming in ragged gasps as they prepared to make their final stand. Little did they know that their fight for survival was far from over, and that the true horrors of the outbreak had only just begun to reveal themselves. Chapter 6. A Sacrifice Made. As Ronald and Sarah found themselves cornered by the relentless horde of zombies, desperation clawed at their hearts. But amidst the chaos, Sarah's sharp eyes caught sight of a glimmer of hope, a gun strapped to the belt of a fallen zombie guard. "We need that gun," Sarah declared, her voice tinged with determination as she locked eyes with Ronald. Ronald's gaze met hers, his expression torn between fear and disbelief. "We'll never make it," he protested, his voice heavy with resignation. But Sarah shook her head, her resolve unwavering. "I told you I have your back, right?" she reminded him, her voice a quiet promise amid the madness. With a silent nod, Ronald braced himself as Sarah surged forward, forcing her way through the mass of undead with fierce determination. With each step, she deftly dodged their grasping hands, her eyes fixed on the prize before her. And then, in a flash of motion, Sarah reached the fallen guard and seized the gun, her fingers closing around the cold metal with a sense of purpose. With practiced precision, she aimed and fired, the sound of gunshots ringing out through the chaos as two of the walking dead fell to the ground, their lifeless bodies crumpling to the floor in a heap. But as Sarah turned to face the remaining zombies, a chilling realization dawned on Ronald. A lone zombie lurked in the shadows, poised to strike. With nothing but a makeshift weapon in hand, Ronald launched himself into action, his movements fueled by adrenaline and determination. Shot after shot rang out as Ronald fought tooth and nail to hold back the tide of the undead, his muscles burning with exertion as he pushed himself to the brink of exhaustion. With each fallen zombie, the odds shifted in their favor until only one remained standing, a lone figure in the darkness, its eyes fixed on Ronald with a hunger that sent shivers down his spine. With what remained of his chair leg in hand, Ronald closed the distance between them, his breaths coming in ragged gasps as he prepared to deliver the final blow. And then, with a swift and decisive strike, he brought the makeshift weapon down with all his strength, the sound of bone crunching beneath the force of the blow echoing through the silent room. With the last of the zombies vanquished, Ronald wasted no time in hurrying to Sarah's side, his heart pounding with a mixture of relief and dread as he assessed her injuries. But as he reached out to comfort her, his hand brushed against a bloody wound on her arm, the unmistakable mark of a zombie bite. His breath caught in his throat as he met Sarah's gaze, her eyes filled with resignation. "Come on, boss. We know the drill. Shoot me," she pleaded, her voice barely above a whisper. Ronald's heart shattered as he realized the truth of her words. With a trembling hand, he reached for the gun, his fingers closing around the cold metal with a sense of finality. And then, with a heavy heart, Ronald raised the gun, his hand steady as he aimed. With a single shot, the sound of gunfire echoed through the building, marking the end of one life and the beginning of another chapter in the fight for survival. Chapter 7. A Beacon of Hope. With a heavy heart and shaken resolve, Ronald made his way back to the airwaves, his footsteps echoing through the silent studio. As he settled behind the microphone, the weight of the world pressed down upon him, but he knew that now, more than ever, his voice was needed to rally the spirits of those listening. "Good evening, everyone," Ronald began, his voice steady despite the tremble in his hands. "I know things seem bleak right now. The world outside these walls is filled with darkness and uncertainty, but in times like these, it's important to remember the indomitable spirit of humanity." He paused, gathering his thoughts as he searched for the right words to convey the depth of his conviction. Throughout history, mankind has faced countless trials and tribulations. Wars, plagues, natural disasters. We've weathered them all, and each time we've emerged stronger, more resilient than before. Ronald's voice swelled with emotion as he spoke, his words ringing out with a sense of hope that transcended the chaos of the world outside. "We have a choice, my friends. We can succumb to fear and despair, or we can stand together and face this challenge head on. And I choose to believe in the power of the human will to overcome." He paused, allowing his words to sink in as he gazed out into the darkness beyond the studio walls. "So let's hold on to hope, my friends. Let's cling to the belief that no matter how dark the night may seem, the dawn will always break. We will prevail, we will survive, and together, we will rebuild." With a final message of encouragement, Ronald signed off, his voice a beacon of hope amid the storm. But as the last echoes of his speech faded into the silence, a chill settled over the studio, a harbinger of the unknown horrors that awaited them in the darkness. And then, with a flicker and a buzz, the lights went out, plunging the studio into darkness and leaving Ronald to grapple with the uncertainty of the future that lay ahead. And with that, we bid you farewell from the depths of the apocalypse. Thank you for tuning in to Radio of the Dead, where the undead roam and the living fight for survival. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay alive, and keep that radio dial tuned to the frequencies of hope. Thank you for being a part of our community. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Until next time, stay safe out there.